Arirang Special.
세월호 입장하고 있어서 기사님 처음 중입니까? 예, 그렇습니다. 해경 다시 부탁드리겠습니다. 예, 제가 기울어서 금방 넘어갈 것 같습니다.
우리 뭐야 우리
조류가 워낙 세요.
한정에 가면은 심하지 않나. 껌껌하고 어두운 그 조류가 센 바다. 7m 이상 가쁘냐 시야가 안 돼.
남일 같지 않고 다 제일 같고
저도 먹먹하고 많이 슬픕니다.
왜 내가 선생님이 살아있다면 부디 꼭 살아서 구조되기를 바랍니다.
(11 a.m. on April 16, 2014). Tanon High School in Ansan was quieter than usual as second-year students were away on a field trip. At that hour, 17-year-old students of this high school were underwater in the sea and not on the island of Jeju, their field trip destination. All communications were cut off with children on board the ferry.
가 신호는 가는데 이거 전화를 안 받아. 안개가 꼈으면 출동을 시키지 말아야지. 왜 배를 왜 띄우냐고. 돈보다 더 귀한 게 생명이라고.
일단 학부모부터 타세요.
Parents of the high school students rushed down to Jindo Island in Jeonnam-do province. Last time they saw their children, they were leaving home with a smile, excited about the school trip. For these parents, the reality is too much to bear.
오전에 다문아 무슨 일이야, 무슨 말이야, 이렇게 해가지고 보낸 1시간 후에 보냈거든요. 근데 답이 없더라고요.
아직까지 확인 안 하고.
예. 확인이 안 됐어요. 누구한테 와서 물어봐도 누가 대답해주는 사람이 있는가요? 기다리고 있다 뉴스만 계속 듣고 왔는데 죽은 사람만 그렇게 많이 나오고.
Pengmokhang Harbor is the nearest port from the accident site. The parents desperately searched for their children's names on the survivors list in vain. One family member after another passed out. The first rescue ship arrived carrying survivors of the disaster. The number of those rescued was a mere third of the 476 people who were on board the ill-fated ferry. The survivors clearly remembered the horrendous moment of capsize.
물이 차오른다고 해서 그 복도를 봤는데 거의 저희 방까지 계속 그러니까 엄청 빨리
물이 갑자기 차고 진짜 막 얼굴까지 다 차가고 진짜 생각 그런 게
그냥 순항하다가 갑자기 급속하게 그냥 배가 측면으로 기울었어요.
An unimaginable series of events folding before their eyes. All these parents can do at this point is to call out their children's names. "40 minutes since the ferry began to sink, rescue efforts were in full gear. By then, the ship had listed significantly. Korea Coast Guards and rescue workers were hard at work on their rescue operation.
사람의 선지를 보다 한 90% 정도 넘어가 지금 거의 다 넘어갈 상태거든요. 저희들이 약 한 30분 전에 거기서 인명 구조를 해가지고 철수를 했거든요. 그 상태에서 그들이 기다릴 수 없어서 다시 현장으로 갑니다.
Rescue workers hanging out of helicopters reached out to rescue passengers clinging on the deck and saved their precious lives. At times of despair, divers jumped into the ocean without hesitation to search for more passengers. Civilian fishing boats operating nearby the sea also took part in rescuing passengers who managed to jump out of the sinking ferry. However, only 174 people out of the 476 passengers on the ferry were rescued. It was a disaster that transpired within 2 hours since the ferry began to list. What led to such tremendous damage? What was going on inside the sinking Sewol-ho ferry? At the moment of sinking, the ferry is seen tilted at a 50-degree angle to the horizon. Passengers remain still, while some are seen leaning on the floor, which now stands on the side. Passengers heard ongoing announcement telling them to take shelter inside the cabin.
거의 한 70도 이상 기울은 거예요. 이게 구조 헬기가 온 상황이고 그때가 요때가 제일 긴박한 상황이에요. 요때가 갑자기 확 기울어진 거예요. 예, 갑자기 1분 사이에 이렇게 기울어졌어요.
그 자리 있으라고 그래서 계속 있었는데 나중에 되니까 물 막 갑자기 차오르고 이러고 그래서 그게 정신이 없었어요. 막 애들 무서워가지고 막 소리 지르고 살려달라고 막 그러고.
The students trusted the announcement and did what they were told to do. Although considerable time had passed, enough for a rescue helicopter to arrive, aside from the few who evacuated the sinking ship, most of the students remained in their cabins.
구명조끼 입고 위험하니까 가만히 있으세요. 계속 그거를 한 방송 10번 했어요. 그러니까 애들이 가만히 있을 수밖에 없었고 일부 학생이 움직인 애들만 사는 거라니까.
During the 1-hour period that the ferry was listing, the same announcement was aired 6 times. What were the captain and crew up to when they should have been looking after the safety of the passengers? In addition to wasting precious time radio communicating for 31 minutes, he got on one of the first rescue boats and evacuated the sinking ferry. Not only that, he reportedly pretended to be one of the passengers.
유가족분들과 모든 국민들에게 시칠 수 없는 큰 상처와 고통을 안겨주어 마라 제일 말씀드렸습니다. 정말로 수고를 제대하셨습니다.
Slow initial response and poor evacuation procedure at accident site resulted in a national disaster. The captain and crewmen now face criminal charges.
단계별로 책임 있는 모든 사람들에 대해 지휘 고하를 막론하고 민 형사상의 책임을 물어야 할 것입니다. 상식적으로 도저히 납득할 수 없고 용납될 수 없는 살인과도 같은 행태였습니다.
The day after the ferry accident, President Park Geun-hye visited the accident site. She had been briefed of rescue operations all night and came as soon as day broke. There were no news of any more survivors, and bad weather hindered rescue operations. For those anxiously waiting for the return of their loved ones, as well as for those hard at rescue work, it was truly a desperate situation. As soon as she returned to shore, President Park went straight to an auditorium in Jindo Island to meet with families of the missing passengers. Holding the hands of each family members, the Korean leader promised to do her best in search and rescue operations. From waiting in desperation to despair, and from despair to anger, emotions ran high among the parents of those missing high school students, and President Park pledged to carry out a more active rescue operations.
이 얼마나 우리 이 가족들께서 애가 타시겠냐 이런 그 세세한 얘기를 누구보다도 이 가족분들이 들으셔야 되지 않겠습니까?
Even in despair, families of the missing passengers continued to hold out hope that their loved ones will be rescued. And the Korean people came together as one to keep hope alive.
4월 17일부터 4월 18일 09시 현재까지 함정 173척, 항공기 29대, 잠수요원 532명을 지속 투입하였습니다.
All manpower necessary for the search and rescue operations were seen at the site of the ferry accident, including the Korean Navy's underwater demolition team, the ship salvage unit, the special forces, Korea Coast Guard, and civilian divers. The civilian divers took part voluntarily on their own expense, but despite their efforts, the sea wasn't on their side.
팽모강에서는 잔잔해 보여도 밖에 바다는 지금 굉장히 거칠습니다.
조류가 워낙 세요. 여기 대한민국에 거의 제일 빠른 조류예요.
팽모가 지금 보도했을 때 굉장히 세지고 있거든요. 한정하게 가면은 심하지 않을까.
But it is too soon to give up. One by one, without any hesitation, divers plunge into the rough waters.
나이트 비치면 한 20-30cm밖에 안 보여. 이렇게 게이지도 잘 안 보여요. 유리는 이제 그 안에 들어갈 때 유리 망쳐가 저 배에 가면 이렇게 저 망치로 깨가면서 이렇게 확인해요.
손을 뻗으면 손끝이 약간 안 보일 정도. 근데 한 7m 이상 가보면 시야가 안 나. 바닥이 시야가 안 나.
The location of the ferry accident is known to have the second most turbulent swirl of fast-moving currents in the country. Local residents also warn that it is a rough waterway. Despite all the obstacles, divers jump into the water, pushing their lives at risk. They can be faced with danger at any moment, and even the most experienced divers find it difficult to navigate.
창문을 깨면은 물이 확 나오는 것도 있어요. 어느 창문은 깨면은 몸이 확 빨려 들어가 물이 확 차. 수압 때문에 이 변화 때문에. 어느는 차 있고 어느는 안 차 있고 다 잡아주고 2인조로 잡아주고 묶고 안 빨려 들어가게 안 튀어나가게. 이렇게 전에 했던 사람이 몰라가지고 해가지고 한번 빨려 들어갔다고.
The sea is fierce to many, but imagine those shivering in frigid water.
내가 이거 뭐 정말 봉사하다 죽어도 좋다는 그런 각오가 없으면 이거 하지도 못하죠. 또 두려움이 없으면 이 바닷속은 껌껌하고 어두운 그 조류가 센 바다를 들어갈 수가 없죠. 지금 어린 생명들이 정말 기적을 바라고 있는데 빨리 이루어져야지 않겠어요? 마지막까지 우리가 기도하고 힘을 합쳐서 노력을 해야죠.
There are 500 civilian divers who have signed up to work as volunteers. And they all feel the same. They will dive into the sea until they hear at least one voice of a survivor. The government decided to introduce a state-of-the-art unmanned underwater vehicle to better facilitate the search and rescue operation. They dropped flares at night and mobilized squid boats and mackerel boats that can illuminate the dark sea.
인장 작업하고 뭐 하는데 불 집어등 켜놓고 밤새도록 수색 작업에 도움 주려고 우리 이렇게 불 켜놓고 이렇게 있습니다.
For these rescue workers, nothing is impossible if it is to search and rescue survivors. On shore, many volunteers from across the country continued their work to provide meals to families of those missing passengers that are desperately waiting for the return of their loved ones.
같은 안산시라는 그 이름만으로도 이제 저희 이 봉사대를 보면 위로가 된다고 그러시더라고요. 그래서 일부러 이제 밥차 봉사하러 지금 여기 와서 이제 어머님들 배식하고.
Medical personnel have also decided to help families who have become exhausted and frail by giving medical supplies, first aid, and psychological therapy.
많이 슬픔에 잠기다 보니까 소화기 쪽이 가장 많이 안 좋은 것 같습니다.
Over in Chindo for Culture Hall, relief goods arrive from those who want to help out but can't make it to the island. Amounting to more than 625,000 items, relief items ranging from daily necessities to food and water, they are given to the families on a daily basis.
그제부터 일을 하다 보니까 엄청났어요. 이게 지금 여기만 있는 게 아니에요. 저쪽 창고에도 지금 엄청 쌓였어요.
고등학교에서 많이 오고 있고요. 또 엄마들이 많이 보내고 있습니다. 전국 각지에서 오고 있고요. 또 외국에서도 지금 물품이 도착하고 있습니다.
People sending relief items also include messages of hope for the victims. Not only Koreans, but also foreigners take their time and effort to show love and support. Meanwhile, people from all walks of life continue to lead a helping hand to the survivors of the ferry accident, with gratitude that they stayed alive when rescue efforts reached them. However, the health and mental conditions of those Tanon High School students who survived the accident turned out to be serious. According to Ansan Korea University Hospital, where many of these students are hospitalized, 44 out of the 76 students were suffering from serious depression and anxiety. On April 18th, Vice Principal of Tanon High School who survived the ferry accident took his own life. This has highlighted the need for intense treatment and counseling for the rescued students as well as the families of the missing.
적어도 한 20개 이상의 상담소가 준비되고 실제 가동되는 건 좀 시간적 차이가 있지만 시민들이 그야말로 정말 슬픔을 느낄 때 상담을 도시 곳곳에서 받을 수 있도록 준비하고 있습니다.
It's been days since the Korean ferry went down with hundreds on board, but the families of those who remain missing continue to spend restless nights, crying and wailing in despair. To help them cope with the situation, the government has stepped up efforts to provide psychological as well as financial support.
지금 그 형제 자매들을 파악한 결과 안산시에 소재한 33개 학교에 140여 명으로 파악이 됐습니다. 그 중에서 친인척에 의해서 돌봄이 가능한 학생들을 제외하고 40여 명의 학생들에 대해서 식사를 지원하기도 하고 생활 편의를.
The Centre Disaster and Safety Countermeasures has decided to cover the cost of mental and physical health treatment for passengers, families, students and staff of Tanon High School, as well as rescue workers. From the first day of the tragic accident on April 16th until today, everyone in this country has kept their eyes fixed on newscasts covering the latest developments of the ferry tragedy. Rather than reports of survivors, it's been filled with a string of devastating news.
만약 내 자식이 그러면 나도 가만히 있지 않을 것 같거든요. 이 상황이 이렇게 진척이 안 되니까 빨리빨리 좀 진척이 돼서 한 명이라도 구조가 됐으면 좋겠는데.
가다가도 혹시나 나올까 이제는 마음을 포기해서도 그 영이라도 찾으면 얼마 좋겠어. 눈물 나. 정말 가슴 아플 일이야.
거의 뉴스를 이제 안 보려고 하더라고요. 예, 좀 계속 자기가 불안해하고 더 이제 화만 나니까.
The entire nation has been lighting up candles every night, hoping for the safe return of those missing. Hoping that their love and support will reach inside the dark ocean.
지금 남일 같지 않고 다 제해갖고 저도 다시 피해를 입자는데.
Religious circles have also come together to pray for the victims of the ferry disaster. Day and night they pray for despair to turn into hope.
우리 가족들이 그래도 어쨌거나 희망을 가지시고 버리지 마시고
생사가 확인되지 않은 학생과 승객 및 승무원들이 무사히 가족의 품으로 돌아올 수 있도록 기도하시기를 바랍니다.
특별히 그들의 부모님과 가족들의 아픔을 하느님께서 위로해 주시기를 기도합니다.
Hoping for a miracle. These yellow ribbons that symbolize solidarity with the families of those missing and hopes that some of the students might be found alive spreaded quickly across the nation. Sports stars also joined in the campaign. Baseball players donned yellow ribbons, many of them pinned to their hats and uniforms. Korea's world-renowned athletes show their support for the victims and their families in their own ways. And hopes to share grief also expanded to the social media. Not only that, world leaders including Pope Francis and US President Barack Obama also expressed their condolences to the Korean people. But most importantly, people all across the globe continue to hold out hope.
Pray that everyone gets home safely, everyone's fine, gets home and survives. And pray for South Korea.
You guys, let's pray. Let's seriously pray that they survive, that they come out of this, that...
The sunken Sewol-ho ferry took down with it the precious lives of our families and friends. And as the clock ticks, the death toll continues to rise, breaking the hearts of many. Until we find the last one alive, we will not give up. We continue to hold out hope as one until the very end.
끝까지 희망 잃지 말고 그리움에 지쳐있는 우리 곁으로 꼭 살아서 돌아와 다오.
Please do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am the sunlight on the ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. I am a